Over the last 15 years of studying business and money, I've found the secret to human freedom. I've unlocked a huge secret that can benefit the rest of humanity. That secret? The only way to achieve freedom for humanity is to grow the impact of small to medium-sized businesses. And this is why I love entrepreneurship, specifically conscious entrepreneurship, to make a difference in the world. You see, my study of money has intertwined with my study of business, where 15 years ago, I started my own company from nothing. And today, we're on track to reach revenues of £15 million. My growth in business and passion for money has led me to understand the economy and what it is. You see, most of humanity is existing instead of living, slaving away to a job they don't like just to pay bills. We weren't made to live like this. And if we allow large corporations to rule the economy, then we suffer. And it will only get worse the bigger these conglomerates get. I will explain why. To give you context into my journey, I used to work in the financial markets, and this gave me an understanding of the monetary system. But you see, jobs weren't for me. And back in 2011, I chose the entrepreneurial route. I started my company SiteLink from the ground up. I've built it to the point where this year we're on track to generate revenues of almost £15 million. And as SiteLink has grown, I'm not involved day to day at all. My focus is now on helping entrepreneurs who are passionate about making an impact in the world scale their businesses to 7 figures and beyond. That is what I'm all about. And this video will explain to you exactly why this is so important. I've studied many things along my journey, but I'm so passionate about money, finance, and the economy. You see, money has always been a driver for me, but what makes me different is I used to use money to fill a void within me, to cover up my insecurities. Like I think most of us are. I was very attached to what it could do for me, but I have invested a lot into my personal development. I now understand who I am and why I am. And that healing has helped me detach from making money just for myself. I've shifted how I see money. And I see it as a tool that can do major things for humanity if used in the right way. At the end of all my searching, what I've come to realize is money is the tool, freedom is the goal, which is true for us as individuals as well as us as a collective. You see, a knife is not good or bad. It depends on the context. You can find one in a street fight to hurt someone, or in a hospital to heal someone. The same is true with money. It can be used to hurt or to heal. And it all comes down to the awareness and the maturity of the people using it. On my journey, I've studied many of the greats. You may have heard of some. People like Warren Buffett, the most famous investor in the world, and Robert Kiyosaki, made famous by his Rich Dad Poor Dad books, to people like Mike Maloney, a financial educator and expert in precious metals and economic cycles, to Lynn Twist, a global activist and author who helped shift attitudes around money, to Napoleon Hill and his book Think and Grow Rich, a book that was the result of over 20 years of studying 500 of the wealthiest men of his time, to studying the works of Professor Richard Werner, an activist, an economist, an ex-professor in banking and finance at Oxford University. So let's get into it. What is the economy? The economy is the system of money and how it moves through the production, distribution, and consumption of products and services. There are different sectors within the economy, sectors like agriculture, mining, manufacturing, and technology, to services like retail. The forces that determine the growth or decline of an economy is about supply and demand, which then determines prices and resourcing. There is a global economy, as well as local ones, attached to countries, regions, and cities. And guess what? You have your own very personal economy too, to which I hope is doing well for you. The economy or the monetary system is the most extraordinary invention we have ever built. It allows us to wake up in the morning, reach for a carton of coconut water, pour it into a glass, and drink it. Think about the organization and allocation of resources that went into that glass of coconut water, just so you can have it with your breakfast. I find this fascinating. See, we work in the monetary system for our whole adult lives, so it's very important for you to understand what it is. But a big problem is that the monetary system seems complicated, but it's not. And because of this, no one takes the time to understand it, when in fact it's quite simple to understand when you grasp the basics and cut out what is not important. It is the purposeful use of technical jargon misinformation, and split opinions that confuses it. So we hand the monetary system over to the so-called experts. I believe that there are only a few experts. Most are playing a guessing game. And if you want to understand where the economy is going and what our potential is, then we must study where we have been. Understanding the history of our monetary system will give you an idea into why we are where we are today. So let's go all the way back to 3100 BC, to a time in ancient Egypt. This was the birth of money in the form of physical gold. The Egyptians did their best to create a standardized weighting to the metals, but it was not accurate. But it was the birth of trading precious metals that fueled the growth of ancient Egypt. Think of it like this: the start of using precious metals for trade captured human intelligence and captured potential for labor and put it to work. The next significant event in the history of money was in 650 BC, where the king of Lydia, which is modern day Turkey, turned gold and silver into coins. See, this move into coinage was the birth of the first monetary system. These coins are still around today and you can actually buy them, but no one else did it like ancient Greeks in 450 BC. Athens rose to become the pinnacle of Western civilization. Its prosperity led to the achievement of a level of architecture and engineering that the Western world had never seen. This prosperity also created and cultivated great minds like Socrates, Aristotle, and Plato. Athens created the first free market, which drove their dominance and economic expansion. But it all came to an end when they installed a tax system to pay for their wars. The final blow to the Athenian monetary system was the funding of the Athenian and Sparta war. The government of the time installed a tax on the people of Greece, on the wealthy, to pay for the war. The tax was used to pay the soldiers who were spending these coins elsewhere on their travels. And this caused a reduction of the coins in circulation, a deflation, which the government had to find a solution for. And when they started to mix the coins they received from taxation with lesser metals, like copper, they thought they had. But they were debasing their currency and got addicted to this way of expanding their money. It was inflation, and a result was the money in circulation become worth less over time. Inflation, put simply, is this: if there were 100 coins in circulation and a soldier had 2 coins, his 2 coins are 2% of the total value of the coins in circulation. If the government added 100 more coins to the system, his 2 coins are now 1% of the total value of the coins in circulation, half of what it was. As there are more coins chasing the same amount of products, the prices of the products rise, meaning now his 2 coins buy him less. This is inflation in the most simplest terms you will find. But what does that have to do with today's economy? And why is that relevant? Well, by studying our past, we can get an idea into our future. In the wise words of Albert Einstein, if you want to know the future, look at the past. Unfortunately, if you look at the current state of things, we have not learned from our mistakes, or have we? Maybe there is a group using these tactics against us. I won't get into that, but possibly, probably. And that brings me to the most iconic event in our modern history. Back on the 23rd of December 1913, the Federal Reserve was set up. And this is such a key date, and I'll explain why shortly. But the Federal Reserve is the central banking system of the United States. It is privately owned, but we don't stop there. All countries in the world have to buy oil in dollars, making the US economy the most significant in the world. And what that means is private individuals, through the control of the Federal Reserve Bank, have a huge part to play in global economics. So the date of the 23rd of December 1913 is significant. But why? Because there'd been around 3 years of debate over the development of the central bank, with the ones who were advocating for it being some of the wealthiest people in the world. And at the time, they needed to get it pushed through Congress, but they were getting opposition. So they chose a date to vote on it, which was conveniently close to Christmas. And what this meant was that most of their opposition would be home with their families. It was mostly attended by those who were in favour, which gave them minimal opposition to get the Federal Reserve Act signed. And what this did is it transferred the largest economy in the world to the hands of a few private individuals. It is still that way today. And their goal is simple: to control the money creation process. And once you understand how much power this process has on our economic freedom, you will see how we have got to where we are today. Fast forwarding to the 1930s, a key event occurred when over 10,000 banks in America went bust. But these were not any banks. They were local community banks. This is very significant, as these smaller banks were swallowed up into the machine of corporate banking. So what did the Federal Reserve do? You would assume they wanted to protect the local banks. Well, in fact, they did the opposite. By doing nothing, they backed the bigger banks. And once you finish this video and understand how impactful that was, how impactful the centralization of the banks is to everyday people, you will see why this is such a big thing. The two final events that were key for our modern monetary system was to do with the Bretton Woods system. It was implemented back in 1958 to create a stable global economy, making it easier for countries to trade with each other. It did this by pegging the US dollar to the value of gold, to fix exchange rates. Now, all other currencies in the world were now pegged to the US dollar's value, and this gave the US significant power in global trade. Now, if you fast forward to 1978 with President Nixon, he made a huge call when he ended the Bretton Woods system. He took the dollar and all other currencies off of the gold standard. He cut ties with gold. Before this, your dollar or pound represented gold in the bank. But by ending the Bretton Woods Agreement, he changed money forever. This meant that money was now fiat, which essentially means it's not backed by anything of value. And not having anything valuable to back it to means that central banks now decide whether we need more in circulation. It was at that point of coming off of the Bretton Woods system where we plunged into an era of manipulation, because now money can be created out of thin air. Creating money out of thin air is inflation, as we have seen in ancient Greece, is a form of currency debasement. The result of it is an increase in prices, and an increase in prices leads to a slowly shrinking middle class. A specific country's fiat currency, the pound, the dollar or yen, is designed by the issuing government as legal tender. The value of it is at the mercy of the central bank's monetary policy, which is at the mercy of the centralized International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. If they decide to print more, your money becomes worth less. If they keep printing money, sooner or later, your money becomes worthless. The current monetary system is the biggest scam in the history of the world. It is the single biggest system that impacts our quality of life, and it has been corrupted. We have been fooled into a system that is easily manipulated in favor of a few. And I'll go into detail about it later. But once you understand the real reasons behind the events in 2008 with the subprime mortgage crisis, and in 2020, you will see how these events impact the weakening of the currencies of the world. And this weakening of the currencies makes living more expensive for the average person. More people are struggling financially. This is the biggest problem we face today. Financial struggles have a negative impact on the fabric of our society. A lack of money means we spend more time working and less time raising our children. It means more people can only afford cheap, poor quality food, leading to poor health. Poverty has a direct correlation with poor mental health, including financial worry and pressures of needing to work. So what are the specific problems within the monetary system, and how are we here? Well, there is only one. And once you have understood what I'm saying in this video, you'll see it clear as day. Have you heard of John Maynard Keynes? Well, John Maynard Keynes was an economist between 1910 and 1940, I think. And he happens to be the most famous economist to have ever lived. Even though he's dead, he's still very influential today. Based on his economic theories, he changed government policies around economics. He's the father of modern day economics. And a lot of economists around today buy into his philosophies. It's called Keynesian economics. Anyway, in 1928, John Maynard Keynes wrote an essay that looked way ahead into the future. It was called Economic Possibilities for Our Grandchildren. And based on that essay, he delivered a speech titled Economic Possibilities. And in that speech, he made a big, bold prediction. He predicted that in 100 years, by 2028, there will be so much productivity gains from the new economy That income per person will rise so much that people will be so wealthy, we won't need to work anymore. Now we're almost at that date of 2028. And it's nonsense. Today, work is a necessity. A lot of families need 2 adults to work just to put food on the table. The money we work for today gets us less than ever. But do you know what the crazy thing is? What John Maynard Keynes said about future prosperity was right. In fact, his calculations were underestimated. We've done better than he thought, and we should be more prosperous than ever, but we're not. We shouldn't have to work because of these income gains he estimated, but we have to. So what is the problem, and why aren't we seeing more of a prosperous way of living for us all? Where's the money? Well, the prosperity he calculated has been generated. But what he didn't predict was that it would be so unevenly distributed that around 90% of it would be in the hands of a few. And this centralization of wealth has been achieved by the design and functionality of the monetary system. The only problem is the centralization of wealth. That's it. And this has been done by the centralizing of the banks. Now we hear it all the time, it's the banks that are the problem. But Professor Richard Werner makes this clear. It is not the banking system that is the problem. It is the centralization of the banks that is the real problem, where bigger banks, universal banks and commercial banks take over smaller banks, retail banks and community banks. You see, there are different types of banks and they have a different purpose, ethos and impact to the wider economy. Community banks, like building societies here in the UK, are for the people. They focus locally by serving individuals and small businesses within a specific geographic area. They are known for their personalised approach that has its roots in a deep understanding of local needs. The key thing with these banks is they serve smaller businesses by offering more flexibility to them than the large banks. And then there are commercial banks like Wells Fargo and Citibank. They're for profit, run solely with the shareholders' interests at heart. They focus on larger businesses and want to do the bigger deals because they want to support larger commercial activities. And then there are these universal banks like HSBC, JP Morgan, Deutsche Bank. Like the commercial banks, they are for profit, run according to shareholders' interests. Not only do they offer commercial banking services, they also offer investment banking services. These banks focus on large-scale financial deals like asset speculation and shift the attention away from the smaller businesses who create things and employ people. Asset speculation is gambling on a large scale, and it was one of the reasons for the financial crisis of 2008. They package up and trade debt, and the downfall of the economy in 2008 was in the form of mortgage-backed securities, which was a gamble on the ever-increasing price of property. The more powerful investment banks become, the more they contribute to economic inequality and instability. And 2008 was a new chapter for the banking system. The financial crisis of 2008 caused such an upheaval for the locally focused community banks, as many of them were taken over by the bigger banks. You see, what happens is, every financial crisis creates new policy, and new policy favours the big boys. As a result of the 2008 crash, there was the Dodd-Frank Act. This act was a piece of compliance in the banking system that tightened regulations. And this tightening of regulations increased compliance costs for the banks. It hit smaller banks hard and favoured the bigger banks. So what happened? A lot of community banks failed due to the rise in operating costs and were swallowed up by the larger banks. Examples were in the UK, we used to see loads of building societies, but now we don't really see as many because they were merged into the bigger banks. And according to Professor Richard Werner, over the last 40 years in America, over 10,000 smaller banks have been killed by the Federal Reserve. And over the last 20 years in Europe, over 5,000 banks were killed by the European Central Bank. He claims that this is why economic growth in the real economy slows down. The bigger, more centralized banks do not favor working with smaller companies. And the secret to human freedom exists here. There is a prosperity engine that is being suppressed. We would see more growth in the real economy if more smaller businesses grow, but more on that later. So the centralization of the banks restricts real economic growth and is suppressing our prosperity engine. But how does this functionality of the monetary system centralize wealth? In 2 ways. First, psychologically. Everything boils down to a lack of education. Most people don't understand the economy, and because they don't understand it, they have no interest. Never forget, in a world of information, being ignorant is a choice. And then there are the people that do have an interest and are trying to understand what is going on. Well, the problem is, all we see is smoke and mirrors through false messaging and narratives. I mean, turn on the mainstream financial news and all you hear is a back and forth of nonsense that just, reviews events at face value. They don't actually tell you anything. But the second way that the monetary system centralizes wealth is through inflation. This is the major force on the economy that robs you and I of our freedom. Inflation is the expansion of the money supply. It causes prices to rise and makes your income worth less every year. It is called the hidden tax, and it's hidden on purpose. Now, even the official narrative around the increasing costs year on year is manipulated. I mean, the fact that they have called the rising prices inflation is a bit of a trick. Again, inflation is the expansion of the money supply, which they control, which causes prices to rise. You see, the official narrative around inflation is confusing and it's manipulated. So you don't see what's really happening. Also, so you don't think it's too bad. But in reality, it is. When the official numbers come out to state inflation is at whatever percentage, do you know what they exclude? House prices and rents. The biggest cost to an individual and the asset class that has risen most in the last 40 years. The official inflation figures coming out are understated. In fact, in 1992, the house price as a multiple of average earnings was around 4.5 times. If you fast forward 20 years to 2022, it's almost 9.5 times. That's insane, especially when you take into account how little earnings have increased over that same period. I mean, let's look at the numbers. Statista, in their research on the cost of living crisis in the UK, claim that the amount needed each week for a single working adult to reach a minimum standard of living was up from £231 in 2021 to £293 in 2022. That's a 27% increase in their figures, and they do not include the cost of housing, all whilst the official inflation statistic was quoted to increase 10%. So do you know how they manipulate the official inflation rate? They have a mechanism, and that mechanism is called the basket of goods. What they do is they compare a basket of goods year on year, but this basket of goods is not consistent year on year. They take things out and replace them with others. It is manipulated. If something is in the basket that is causing the price percentage increase to be unfavorable, well, they take it out. According to the Office for National Statistics, when comparing 2023 to 2024, 16 items were added to the basket of goods and 15 items were removed. How is that accurate? You see, the 2008 financial crash exacerbated the issues. It sped up the centralization of the banks by putting additional compliance pressures on the smaller banks. And as I've spoken about, but it also increased the rate of prices going up, and this was done through printing money. So let's go back to what happened in 2008. 2008 was the time of the subprime mortgage crisis in America. This local crisis then caused a global financial crisis, which made the application of quantitative easing more widespread. Quantitative easing happens when the central banks print money out of thin air and pump it into the system. Again, this is inflation, expanding the money supply, and the result of inflation is an increase in prices. And there have been about 5 instances in the UK alone of quantitative easing, and that was to combat the effects of the subprime crisis. In 2010, there was QE1. They put 200 billion into the economy. 2011, QE2, 125 billion. QE3, 2012, 50 billion. QE4, 2016, 75 billion. And QE5 in 2020, 300 billion. That is almost 750 billion pumped into the system. And again, once money is pumped into the system, it has to go somewhere. And it does. It goes into the system and chases the same amount of products and services, causing an increase in prices. You see, the subprime crisis back in 2008, which a lot of experts claim could have been prevented, was mainly down to a lack of proper regulation on KYC, know your client, which caused them to approve loans to anyone. Ask anyone who got a mortgage before 2008, and they're going to tell you how easy it was to get one. These financial institutions, they didn't qualify the people they were lending money to. I believe this was done purposefully, and I'll show you why later. But if you mix this lending to anyone with the pressure and huge bonus opportunities put on the workers of the banks to sell these mortgages, this looseness creates the cracks in the system. And there is no doubt in my mind that the people in control wanted that to happen. Now, based on that logic, you can see what the agenda is. It is to centralize our banks whilst debasing our currency so much using inflation that our currencies become worth less over time, and this makes it more expensive for the average person to live. And this creates an ever-expanding wealth gap between the top and the bottom. Now think about why wars are so important. According to SIPRI, the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, in 2023, global military spending reached $2.4 trillion, a record high, a 6% increase year on year. This is crazy. But once you see through it and see what the purpose of war really is, we spend money going to war with each other, spend money in the war blowing each other up, and then spend money building the areas destroyed back up again. This is government spending, and they spend public money on this. Governments don't have any money. It's all public money, our money, that we pay for, that is used to pay for all of this. Now, just a mention of what happened in 2020 with you know what. It cost the global economy significantly. Wars through crazy government spending used to be the best way to debase the currency. But since 2020, there's been a new way. Now there is such a thing as a lockdown. And what happened in 2020 cost the global economy anywhere near between like 13 and 17 trillion dollars, I think, with the National Library of Medicine calling it the $16 trillion virus. That is crazy. And if you understand what I'm saying here, simplifying the economy to the forces within versus the forces upon it, then you'll see why people are struggling financially today. You are at war against the forces against you, and the only way out of this war is through your empowerment. And your empowerment is only brought upon by getting educated and putting what you have learned into action. Knowledge is not power, wisdom is power. And you can only gain wisdom by applying that knowledge. The process of trying, of falling down, of picking yourself back up again, and learning how to do things better next time. Wisdom comes with experience. So I've run through a lot of technicalities and quite a bit of negativity. Although it's not my way, but we have come into a special time for humanity, a time where the darkness will come to light, and I feel compelled to shed light on the darkness. However, there is a purpose to all of this. The manipulation, the centralization, and the corruption have played their part in getting us to where we are today. The chaos and desperation we see, we actually need, as they bring about change. It did for me on a personal level, and it will for us on a collective. You see, the so-called bad things in our lives force us out of our comfort zone and challenge us to rise up. This level of darkness is not a thing to attack. It's an opportunity for our species to look in the mirror and see what we are doing to each other, to the planet, and to ourselves. We are them. There is no them and us. We are one. They are a reflection of the collective consciousness, which gives us a clue into what we need to work on individually. So before I get into the solutions, the specific solutions around what we need, fundamentally we need education. We need people to take their education seriously. We need people to really understand the power of entrepreneurship and really take this understanding of what we are here to do through business seriously. And that really is a shift in mindset about what business really is. You see, business, company, comes from the Latin terms, in etymology, comes from the Latin terms compan, to break bread. And it's about sharing. It's about the benefit of the greater good. I believe there's nothing more spiritual than being in business. And that is everything. So what are the specific solutions to all that I've mentioned? Two things that need to work hand in hand. Entrepreneurship, an increase in the success of the small to medium-sized business, and more community local banks that support the success of these small businesses. We need more activity in the real economy, not in the speculation of the investment world. Small to medium-sized businesses are the lifeblood of the economy. I need you to understand how important entrepreneurship is. It is the prosperity engine we are sitting on that we spoke about earlier. In the UK alone, SMEs defined by companies that have 0 to 249 staff make up 51% of all the turnover and 61% of the employment. It is imperative that we decentralize both the banking system and the corporate world by becoming more entrepreneurial and supporting local businesses. According to Professor Richard Werner, who I quote a lot because I love his work, the ingredient of success is the SME. Smaller firms are crucial to the job creation and economic resilience because they are tied to the local economies that stimulate local communities. He's an advocate for the small business and local business partnerships and sees the two going hand in hand. His study of one of the strongest economies in the world, more specifically Germany, and he put their economic strength down to having a strong presence of locally focused banks whose purpose is to facilitate the economic growth of smaller firms. It is also the reason the US has had such a strong economy. They're state dependent, and that causes more local initiatives. However, as we have mentioned earlier, although they have had more local banks, the trend is that they are on the decline, which has reduced access to funding for local businesses and in favor of the larger banking activity like investment banking and asset speculation. Richard Werner's research concludes that economies with strong networks of local banks support SMEs better, and that drives greater economic inclusivity and more sustainable growth. On the other hand, an economy dominated by large banks often fails to provide enough support for smaller businesses, which weakens local economies and increases reliance on speculative financial activities. You see, you don't need to be a financial expert to understand its basic economics. Economies with lots of small local banks get to know and give more loans to small businesses. That helps them grow, create jobs, and make communities stronger. But when big banks dominate, they often focus on making money from risky investments like stock trading instead of helping small businesses, which then hurts local economies and makes the whole system more unstable. So what do you need to do? You need to support your local businesses and local banks. They are the ones that will support us. And it's a great time to be alive, as we have a range of fintech solutions now too. However, there is a fundamental part of this equation which needs speaking about, and that is entrepreneurship. You. Yes, you. The one with an entrepreneurial itch that needs to be scratched. I know there is an entrepreneur in there somewhere, wanting to come out. You need to start your business for the sake of us all. Or you. Yes, you. The one with the small business that is so passionate about their customer and how to help them. You need to grow your business for the sake of us all. And I'm telling you, it's easier than ever. It is easier than ever. Work with the tides and not against it. And what I mean by this is we have taken a look at what has gone up in price, but now let's take a look at what has gone down in price. Today, you will need to enslave yourself to own a property in any major economy. The opportunity is not there. It's not there. It used to be, but it's not. Not only has the cost of starting a business reduced significantly over the past 20 years, the time it has taken to get one off the ground has too. According to the World Bank, the time it took to start a new business and get it off the ground has more than halved. In 2003, it took entrepreneurs worldwide 52 days to set up a company, and today it only takes 20 days. At the same time, in only 9 countries could you open a business online, where today you can do it in over 65 countries. On top of that, it's also much cheaper to start a business today. The startup costs have reduced so much that anyone at any time can start a business. Comparing the costs over the last 20 years, in the 2000s, you would need between £30,000 and £60,000 to start a business, where today we see people starting a blog for £100 or an Etsy store for like £500 to £1,000. It's these technological advancements and globalization that have made entrepreneurship so much easier and a lot more flexible. Today we see people starting their businesses from their bedrooms, getting involved in dropshipping, content creation, creating websites from a coffee shop, and hiring people from all over the world at a fraction of the cost. In the 2000s, you needed to pay for physical infrastructure, office space, huge equipment, where today you don't need any of that. You see, even marketing has become easier, where before you would need to pay for newspaper, magazine, or TV ads. Today you can start posting on social media or put a few £100 into Google Ads. But not only have the barriers of entry reduced, but the opportunities once you're in business to grow it have too. And this is because of the technology. They're the best they've ever been. I mean, the detail you can get into when advertising, the tools available to you in Google or the social platforms, and the tools that connect to those platforms that help you analyze the data and run experiments is mind-boggling. On top of that, the free flow of information that is available on the web for free via sites like YouTube is insane. If you use it with purpose, and that's the key here, then it can be more valuable than university. It is officially the greatest time to be alive and running a business, and that is pure fact. But on top of that, not only is it the cheapest time to start a business, the most creative time to ever grow a business, but it's the cheapest time to run a business. Small business research conducted by business.org claims that compared to the traditional businesses like storefronts and mobile businesses, who spent close to £65,000 in their first year to operate, online businesses spent £20,000 to operate theirs. The world of business has changed. My parents, who are between 60 and 70 years old, had a golden age 30 years ago, and that was property. Our golden age is technology, but not just any use of tech. Technology used for entrepreneurship. I'm telling you, time goes fast and opportunities don't last a lifetime. And you don't want to look back and think, I could have and I should have. That's victim mindset, and it's not acceptable. If you have an entrepreneurial itch that needs to be scratched, come on in. If you have what it takes, then it could be the best decision of your life. So in summary to all of that, number one, although it seems complicated, the fundamentals of the economy are basic, and it is imperative for the quality of your life that you grasp the basics. Research the people I've mentioned at the start of this video. Number two, money's history began with gold in ancient times. Athens' free market economy thrived until funding war led them to currency debasement and inflation. Inflation, the creation of more money, lowers its value and causes prices to rise, as seen in ancient Greece's monetary collapse. 3. The creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913 centralized US's economic control. The end of the Bretton Woods system in 1971 shifted money to fiat currency, and this enabled central banks to print money, causing inflation and currency debasement. This system benefits a few elite players, leading to a shrinking middle class, rising living costs, and widespread financial struggles. Number 4. The key issue with the monetary system is the centralization of wealth, where we have seen huge production gains, but 90% of the prosperity has ended up with the 1%. Number 5. Large banks dominate, which does not help the real economy grow and further concentrates power. Inflation and interest rates controlled by the central banks decrease the purchasing power of the average person. Events like the 2008 financial crisis have worsened inequality, making life more expensive for many. Number 6, we're at a turning point where the chaos we see today, all the corruption, centralization, and inequality, can spark a positive change. A change that relies on entrepreneurship and local banking. They are both key to economic resilience. Small businesses drive job creation and community growth, while decentralized banking systems support their success. And number 7, today, starting, growing, and running a business is easier and cheaper than ever, thanks to technology and lower startup costs. This mix of technology with entrepreneurship is our generation's golden age. Number 8, by shifting our focus to small businesses and local banks, we can unlock this prosperity engine, which is the secret to freedom of humanity. Number 9, you are the one you've been waiting for. All it takes is the right intention mixed with the right information. Now is the time to embrace entrepreneurship.